Welcome to Moral Side of the News. We're glad you're with us this weekend. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. With me, as always, is a distinguished panel this week. Dr. Jamesetta Ferguson, St. Peter's United Church of Christ and MOLO Village CDC. Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, Centenary United Methodist Church, New Albany. Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School. And Father Joe Graffis, Archdiocese of Louisville. We begin today with this question: how do we keep weapons out of schools? The Jefferson County Public School Board has voted to move forward with a plan to install weapons detectors at all 41 middle and high schools. The price tag, $17 million. Turning to our panel on Moral Side of the News panel, let's hear your thoughts.
It's tragic, but so very necessary.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It's a necessary evil that we've got to do this. Unfortunately, our kids are in possession of more weapons, and we've got to protect our children. They're vulnerable to all of this, and we have to do what we need to do to protect them.
I certainly agree with all of you on that. We've got to protect, but boy, when I saw the price tag somewhere between 17 and $20 million over 5 years, I said, boy, that could pay for a lot of teachers' salaries, and that could pay for a lot of things that our kids in public schools need so desperately to raise their scores and stuff like that. And they said they've got the money, which always raises questions. How do we end up having that $20 million over here, but we can't do this over here?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what funds that comes out of, but someone loses in the process.
Yeah.
But protecting kids has got to be a number one goal. I certainly can't argue with that. I just wish it wasn't that expensive. And the other thing is this whole artificial intelligence type of thing, which is always another whole interesting question. How does that work? I don't know. I've been through metal detectors, but this is supposed to be a little easier or better. And thank God they're not as ugly as metal detectors are. But unfortunately, I don't see how we can avoid it.
I don't understand how it works. It sounds great, but it doesn't make much sense to me.
The new technology these days. So
I want to go back for a minute to the price tag and Superintendent Polio's comment that his frustration and how I can see that building for him, that the focus of the school board meeting has to be on guns and not on how to recruit teachers and get teachers and raise teachers' salaries who are so deserving. And so we have to, the schools have to then get proactive for social ill that legislators could still do something about, but haven't. And so it trickles out into the smaller community efforts for the schools to have to do something, for places of worship to have to consider that question, for store owners to consider what will they do. It just seems a hot mess to me that we've placed the school systems in this difficult financial situation to have to, it seems to me, and it may not be this cut and dry, but to choose the teaching elements over the gun and weapon element and putting these devices in. And I agree with you. $17 to $20 million would really help in the teaching end of things. So where will these people come from? Where will they find those who will work these, and how will that be paid? And then what happens when a student is found with a gun or a staff person? What's that protocol look like?
Yeah, I think one part of the 17 million was hiring specialists in the school to be able to manage this, but then hiring officers as well. And of course, there's a shortage of everybody in the school system. where do all these jobs come from? Unless you're paying higher salaries to attract people, and there you go again.
Yeah. But again, we're not dealing with the real issue. And the real issue is are the guns and the violence that comes as a result of that. And until we're willing as society to deal with that issue, then we're going to keep throwing, I guess, bad money or good money after bad. I don't know what the saying is, but we are not spending our money wisely. We're not being good stewards of the money that we have because we're having to deal with issues that people refuse to deal with. To say that all of this is because of mental health or social economics and all of that, that's one thing. And yes, some of that is true, but the main issue for me is that we're not scratching what's itching, and that's the ownership of guns.
James, and I so agree with you. It's sort of like putting a Band-Aid on a tumor.
Right.
It just we've got to deal with the issue, and we've got to deal with it purposefully. We can't deal with it by kidding ourselves.
Right.
As somebody has said, there's the idolatry of guns over children, and I respect hunters. I respect people who own guns and use them responsibly. And just like with cars and everything else, you need to be responsible when you're using something that's deadly. And yet we don't seem to be able to deal with that.
Right.
And Stan, to answer your question, it's a less intrusive system than a metal detector. Somehow with this new technology, it senses weapons and explosives as you walk through basically a hallway. So we'll see how it works out.
But most hallways in most high schools and middle schools, you have you don't have students walking single file one at a time. You have a mass of students. And my question is, how is, God forbid, the student hiding the weapon singled out? That's my question.
Excellent question. We'll find out, I guess, as the months move on. All right, let's move on to a second topic on our program, Moral Side of the News. Thank you for watching and listening with us this weekend. Earlier this week, protesters gathered in Carrollton to decry the hiring of the Louisville police officer whose bullet killed Breonna Taylor in March of 2020. Miles Cosgrove, who was fired by Louisville Metro Police in 2021, has been hired by the Carroll County Sheriff's Department. Panelists, what do you have to say about this, and does Cosgrove deserve another chance?
This is a tricky question in terms of many things, but it just seems like, given the state of things right now, that this is not a good thing for Carroll County or, even for the officer. Obviously, he wants another job and all that kind of stuff. He's got some experience. He is more than an hour away from Louisville, or 45 minutes or so, but I think it does seem to be a real insult to people in Jefferson County, and especially people who were affected by this in Jefferson County. And the lack of perhaps proper procedures at the time for which he got fired. And he evidently has some other reports on his list as well from reading the news account. So it kind of seems to me that Carroll County didn't do a great background research into all of this. Does the man deserve a job? Probably. But I think maybe law enforcement is not where he needs to be, or at least on the street.
It's also very indicative of the divide between urban and rural. not just in Kentucky, all over the country. If I was a person of color and I would be traveling through that particular county, the fact that this man has been hired by that county would make me extremely apprehensive for myself or any members of my family or any of my friends who would also be in that same path.
And evidence of that concern was given by the librarian who was quoted in the article that we were sent about how concerned she is for their community, that those who wish to speak up are fearful. Officers who may wish to speak up can't because of the mentality of the brotherhood and the tightness of the police department. So where is safety to be found if we can't speak that which is our truth and be comfortable with that? And I agree with you, Stan. What message is this sending to the wider community?
Right.
It surprised me that he would seek work in law enforcement again. I agree with you, Joe, that maybe a second career option might be something to look at.
You know, it sounds to me as though this is a friendship hire that this sheriff in Carroll County knew of this individual and knew that he had been unable to get employment. And so he chose to employ him because the other accounts are that, and I don't know how true it is that the city officials in Carroll County did not know that this hiring was going to take place. And so, but they said that they had no control over the hiring for this sheriff. And so it's just another indication for me of the good old boy system that continues to take care of one another. And I am fearful of the people in that community because we did not deal with the issue here in Jefferson County. We've passed the buck on to somebody else. And I think in time, unfortunately, it will happen again.
All right, panel, thank you for your thoughts on that topic. We have a third topic on moral side of the news this week. Will we have a Trump-Biden rematch in the next presidential race? President Joe Biden said he will seek a second term to, quote, finish the job. He would be 82 if reelected, 86 at the end of that 4-year term. His response to questions about his age, quote, it's legitimate for people to raise issues about my age, and the only thing I can say is just watch me, end of quote. Panel, what do you think about President Biden seeking reelection?
Well, it didn't surprise me that he was going to do that, but age of both men concerns me, since I'm of the same age, give or take. I couldn't imagine taking on that job and the stresses that it has at that age, which means the vice president is even more something that we all need to look at. Obviously, Vice President Harris will be continuing on. It certainly looks like Trump would be the nominee. Who he picks, God help us all, given some of the people who he would like to have in that position. So I worry about the nation and the consequences of all of that, and the health of both men. Former President Trump is not in the greatest physical shape in the world, despite what he might say. President Biden seems to be in a little better shape, but hey, 80, 82. Your mental faculties are not quite as great as they were when you were 70. I know that from experience. So it is concerning me, and we need, again, we've got so many people in Congress and senators, including our own state senator McConnell. We need a new, fresh blood in there in lots of ways, and I don't know how do we let the next generations get into those roles, because the top seems to be holding on to power forever, and I don't think that's healthy for the country. Other nations, of course, have done it. Germany and certainly in Israel and other places that I'm immediately conscious of, but it is concerning.
I wonder how our nation will fare. Just to think of those two running the campaign trail is exhausting emotionally and intellectually to consider for our country that I think is still coming out of that chaos and finding some healing and some stable ground. You know, look at all that we've endured as a nation since that time. I don't know, do we have the energy to go through that again with the two of them? And I don't appreciate Trump's bullying, and so I worry about that and the words that will be slung across social media again and newspapers and airwaves. It's been a relief not to wake up to that every day.
I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified, because there is the potential during this election cycle for there to be so much apathy amongst the electorate. And that's what scares me more than anything, because if there is apathy, perhaps the people we will get leading our country will not be leading in the best interest of the United States of America. I believe that, yes, President Biden is older than anyone else who's gone for that office. But I also look at his record, that he made certain promises during the 2020 election, and he has kept those promises. He has willfully moved toward doing what he said he was going to do. Not a lot of fireworks and not a lot of fanfare, but just moving in that direction.
Well, and I think in all, we have lots of issues, whether it's immigration, whether it's guns, we have issues that really need to be discussed. Obviously, the abortion issue is another controversial issue on many different sides. And how do we get back to some decent discussion where two sides can disagree, but make some quality informed points? I think we need a conservative point of view. I think we need a progressive point of view. And how do we find compromises in between? That's how we function. Obviously, as a pastor for 45 plus years, a lot of times you got to compromise when you're running a parish and there's many different points of view. And how do we find a way that kind of respects both sides of issues? That's what democracy is all about, and trying to help that in the world, trying to lift up democracies, whether it's in the Ukraine or whether it's in other parts of the world. If we can't model that well, that hurts that whole idea of democracy in many nations that are trying to discover that. But a healthy democracy, not just a shouting match and misinformation, and both sides do it. But some sides seem to be doing it more, and people buy it hook, line, and sinker, which is, this baffles me completely. But how do we have serious issues that need to have serious discussion, and we're not having that right now.
Joe, you've laser so focused on the intrinsic problems that we were looking forward to in 2024. And it's, one would think, well, it's one candidate or the other. Well, it seems like one candidate, we know President Trump, we know how he functions. The other candidate is more at war with the Walt Disney Corporation than trying to figure out a way to get a message about actually leading the country. And as I understand political conservatives, I thought they were pro-business. They don't go to war against one of the largest corporations in the world.
So that leads me to a follow-up question. Do you have any thoughts about the possibility of some unknown at this point, or underdog? Go back in history, even go back to Harry Truman, you can go back to Jimmy Carter, even Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, people who came from virtual obscurity to be the nominee for their party. Do you have any thoughts about that happening in 24?
I don't see how it could happen. I mean, I think Democrats want to respect President Biden. If he wants to run, they're not going to oppose him. And I think out of respect, I can certainly understand that. Obviously, in the Republican Party, there are a few candidates surfacing, but Mr. Trump has at least probably 35% of a base that is absolutely for him. And I don't see any of those people able to, even the governor of Florida, able to crack that. So I think the two candidates are inevitable, unless something happened, whether somebody gets put in jail or there's a heart attack or some other physical thing that would open that up. But that could be chaos too in lots of ways. But right now, no one can come surface because of those two. At least my observation is that.
Okay. Thank you, panel. For that topic, we have a couple more I want to sneak in here if we can. We've got about 5 minutes left. An unexpected treat from Mother Nature has been enjoyed in areas unaccustomed to having a view of the aurora borealis, or northern lights. A geomagnetic storm last week meant some Kentucky and Indiana residents got in on the view. Panel, were any of you out there looking at the sky, and did you see the display?
No, but I wish I had.
No, I didn't see it either.
Same here.
It's a little past my bedtime. I was thinking of that. I was visiting some friends of mine in Minnesota last year. And we were out on a lake in Wisconsin, and a totally clear sky. And of course, the stars were all out. And my friend up there said, "Have you ever looked at the app called Night Sky?" I've never heard of. And he put it on his phone there, and we could look up at the sky, and this app kind of shows you all the stars that you're seeing out there. And we were out there a couple hours, and it was absolutely, of course, clear sky. You could almost read a book, and by the light of the stars, they were so bright. But it was an absolutely fascinating app, which I've used on a lake here in Kentucky a couple of times. It's just amazing. And I guess the first thing comes to my mind, how can there not be a God, a mind who creates all of this more massive universe than our little planet in one little solar system? If you don't believe there's a God, there has to be a higher being that's well beyond anything I can imagine when you see those kind of things. So I think it's always a signpost to God.
Absolutely poetic, Joe. Thank you.
Points to Psalm 8, doesn't it? What is humanity that you would care for us? That after the psalm writer sees the beauty of the night sky. Maybe that helps us. Maybe we need to look at the night sky as we read the news. And think about all the things that are facing us right now. Be reminded of how small we are in the big picture.
Yeah.
Let Mother Nature take over maybe instead.
It's always those pictures of the world that we see from space, and we see not only one in whatever it was, 67, 68, which is still, I have a large drawing or picture of that in a room upstairs, and every once in a while I just go up and just look at that because it says, remember, it's all the people of the world are God's children, not just a couple of chosen people. With great respect to my Jewish brothers and sisters as well, that we're all God's children, and God made all of this. And look how beautiful the planet is, and we're just one little tiny thing in a universe. The new cosmology, boy, it is stunning sometimes.
That picture is called Earth View. It was taken by the crew of Apollo 8 as they circumnavigated the moon. Christmas Eve, 1968, I think.
Yes.
Right.
I read from Genesis. Do you remember that stirring moment?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Amazing. All right, one more question before we go. Minute and a half left. It's Derby week. Are you going to parties, festivities? Do you partake, throw numbers in a cup, draw out numbers, have fun at a neighbor's house? Anything exciting happening for you just to have fun? It's springtime. It's Derby time.
Stay away from crowds and smile at the tourists.
I love to watch. I love to watch the horses. Even I place a few bets, but I said they're such beautiful animals. I usually go to a couple of Derby parties in the backyard of somebody's yard. It's always fun. It's so laid back, and that to me is more fun than I've been to the track. It's just so crowded and so expensive now that. You see so much on TV more than you can see while you're there. I enjoy Derby Day, but it's fun to have visitors too.
I enjoy Derby. It's like a holiday, right, around here, and there are lots of things to do, and it's a time where everybody is just kind of in the celebration mode, and everybody's getting along, and there's parties and cookouts and just lots of things to do. And I don't participate as much as I used to in my youth, but I do enjoy a couple parties and just being in fellowship with people, something that we've missed over the last few years and have an opportunity to do again. So I'm looking forward to it.
Very good. Thank you, Jamesetta Ferguson, for those final words. We'll wrap up this edition of Moral Side of the News. Thank you, Harriett Akins-Banman, Stan Miles, Joe Graffis, and Jamesetta Ferguson. Join us again next week as the conversations continue here on Moral Side of the News. Thank you, panel. The 70th annual WHAS Crusade for Children is just a few months away, and there's something new and special. For just $70, make a contribution, and you get a raffle ticket to a kitchen full of GE appliances. And join us again next week with an all-new conversation here on Moral Side of the News.